Yes. So, and please do write in the chat immediately if there's some issue with the audio. That's of prime importance when it comes to storytelling. Okay, here we go. Okay. We do start. I mean, I'm just calling this a salesperson. Adjusting the video or audio or something? No. Right. Can I go ahead?
Please.
Yeah, thank you. So I am calling the salesperson the wandering minstrel who sells. Now I'll give you a fair idea of who the wandering minstrel is. I mean, storytelling for ages before it went into print. Today, we look at storytelling from the audiovisual medium. But predominantly for last, I guess, a millennium, we've been into a print medium is what it has been, at least for the last 10 centuries. But prior to that, and even today, not just prior to that, of course, the oral tradition lasted since civilization began. So these wandering minstrels were the one who carried stories from one place to another. Now they did human service to humanity in general, not just telling stories, again, coming back to it from the point of view of entertaining people from one village to another, but telling you doing great service, but telling you secrets of life, telling you about things that you got to do. A part of it, we got to see how we do associate that with our sales thing that we're doing in today's world. Can we have the next slide? Okay, since it's about a storyteller, it's about storytelling, let's start with a short story. And this is part of a story. That's why I want you to listen to this, because this is just the prologue, and an epilogue will come. So this is one of the most wonderful stories. Everyone's heard of Buddha. This is a story when Buddha attained enlightenment. Now, when he attained enlightenment, he kept quiet. It's the bards talk about, great thing about how the entire universe conspired to, they were in great ecstasy. But he wasn't ready to talk. He kept quiet and sat still at that place. And they say the devas who looked up from above, the animals, and everybody was stunned that Buddha has reached the position which perhaps people in millions don't reach. And why is he keeping quiet? And then he did the most odd thing possible for somebody who reached that echelon. He folded his hands and he bowed. And he kept bowing left, he kept bowing right, he kept bowing up, he kept bowing down. And everyone said, what are you doing? किसको नतमस्तक हो रहे हैं? मतलब आप जहां पहुंचे हैं शायद सदियों में कोई नहीं पहुंचता है. And who are you bowing to? I mean, we have not heard anybody reach the position you have. Buddha opened his eyes. And then he told the story, a part of it, which we will get to know about in our epilogue. Thank you. Can we have the next slide, please? Sales pitch as a story arc. Now, when we tell about a story arc, sales pitch is not just you going there, talking over the phone, and it's a 5-minute thing or a 1 hour thing or a couple of meetings or whatever that is. It's not just doesn't end there. It's got an entire story arc like a story has. And what is a story arc? Let's try and understand, and then we'll be able to understand what story pitch, how sales pitch actually works as a pure story arc. Can we have the next slide, please? What does a story have? Anybody, if you ask a storyteller, the basic thing about a story, forget about characters, forget about anything else. It has to have a cohesive beginning. It has to have a solid middle, and it has to have a very, very tangible end. Now, beginning, middle, and end. It sounds a very simple thing. I mean, everything we are talking about, this presentation also will have a beginning, middle, and end. But it's not so easy. One of the things that actually get muddled when we look at a story, whether we see a movie or read a book and we realize it's just not matching up to our standard, is because somewhere down the line, the author, the storyteller, the director, the writer, whoever that is, has perhaps tampered with one of these and not given enough leeway or enough justice to one part of this. So it's very important to understand that a story must have a good beginning, a good middle, and a good end. Same goes for a sales pitch. We'll see that. Can we have the next slide? Common ground. It's just what makes salesperson storytellers? Are we really storytellers? So like Prakash introduced me, I will remain a salesperson for the rest of my life, because I'm whatever else I'm doing as a storyteller also, I'm selling my stories. End of the day, I'm not writing for art's sake. I'm not writing because I need to writing and get kick out of it. Of course I do get kick out of it, but I want people to read what I'm writing. I want people to listen to what I'm saying. So that's definitely as a way of selling. So a salesperson remains irrespective of whatever industry you're going, wherever tag designation you get, you are invariably a salesperson. So we'll have to understand what is that common ground. Storytelling arc is common between the storytelling as well as in sales pitch, and what is the common between a wandering minstrel or a storyteller and a salesperson. Can we have the next slide, please? Learning from the wandering minstrel. I did give you a brief about wandering minstrel. Now, wandering minstrels are still there. Anybody, I don't know if any of you among the 21%, if you can write in chat, I'll be very happy. Anybody from Bengal? Bengal, you had the entire tradition, which is still very prevalent. And people are still doing that from smaller village to village. They keep going that in groups, in jatras, and they tell stories, same stories, but so beautifully, adapted to the situation and the people who are listening. That's what makes it such compelling. I could be telling the same story to 10 different people, but if I am keeping the same tone, same tenor, same pitch, I am a loser. So Ankur is from Bengal. So Ankur does know about a thing or two about the wandering minstrel. It's still the balls of Bengal are the wandering minstrel and a great tradition. Ankur, you would be able to identify that.
Yeah,
So
correct.
that's the wandering minstrel. We ought to learn from them. What do they do? Is there something that they do which is completely different from why I'm using time and again a wandering minstrel is, even as a writer, as an editor, all these years been telling writers, you've got to understand, because there is a certain amount of adaptiveness in a wandering minstrel. He's telling the same story to different villages, but he's adapting the tone and tenor, like I said, to different aspects, because he understands that the recipient is different. So he has to behave in a different fashion and use different body language, use different words. So that's where I think it's a great learning experience for everybody who's selling. Can we have the next slide, please? 5 E's, the core of storytelling. Now let's first understand, before we get to sales, of course, all of you understand sales and perhaps much better than I do. But if you look at from storytelling point of view, what is that core? I mean, if we had to put that core into 5 E's, I call it 5 E's. To me, all these years experience as an editor of commissioning, people do ask me, it's very difficult to actually know what exactly propels you and says this is the story that will work. It's always a hard thing. But if you actually tone it down, it comes to these 5 E's that we will look into that. Can we have the next slide? Emotion goes without saying. That's the first thing that catches. I mean, what do you look at? I mean, is something that it could be laughter, it could be some sadness, it could be any of the navrasas that we talk about in our ancient philosophy. The navrasas that we so greatly utilized by all the Sanskrit playwrights of yore, be it Bhas, be it Kalidas, is to enhance that emotion. How do you take that emotion? What is the level of that emotional quotient that has to be there while you're presenting? That emotional quotient has to be understood by every salesperson. Again, we'll come back to the sales thing, but for a storyteller point of view, that emotion is the core. Which of that emotions, which of that navrasa, which of that thing is the predominant one? Of course, depends on the kind of story you're telling. But there has to be one that is the predominant one, and there are others that come into layers below that. But among all the E's that comes, the first one that comes, and most important one, and the most primary one, is emotion. Can we have the next slide? Earthiness. Now, this is a tricky thing. When I say earthiness, is very hard to describe. And somebody been asking why we can always go, this is Till Cows Come Home, to describe which is your favorite book. To me, some of them books have come from the most weird of places. I think some of you would have read Gabriel Garcia Marquez, 100 Years of Solitude. 100 Years of Solitude is set in a place called Colombia in place which is not heard of. We don't know anything about that. Yet there's a certain earthiness about that entire story which connects. What R.K. Lakshman did with Malgudi, there's no Malgudi. Malgudi doesn't exist. It exists only in his mind. But you and I are able to understand. We're able to identify with them. What is that thing that made R.K. Narayan as well as, let's say, Gabriel Gashimake do that? It's that earthiness in that story. It's that earthiness that they get connected to the root. One of the things, I might be digressing, Prakash will be able to identify much more because both of us served in Amar Chitra Katha. There's a tagline, root to your roots. Root to your roots is very important. So earthiness is that roots that you talk about. That roots is very, very important. So when a story you're telling, either you're telling a story that is rooted, so then as an audience, they are able to identify, yes, ye bande ko malum hai kya bol raha hai. He is not faffing something, he's not saying something which is alien to him. And that's very important. Some of the best stories actually fail is predominantly because we're not able to identify with them. That storyteller is not be able to identify with them. What is that identity? Is the earthiness. It's able to connect yourself. Once you connect yourself with the story, you will be able to make the audience connect. That's again a thing that's very important in storytelling. Can we have the next slide, please? Engagement. Of course, have we not seen a film and come out or read a book and say, brilliant concept, yeah, but kya hai, goofed up. Why did you do such a thing? It's predominantly because there is no such thing as an engagement that happened. If I am telling you something and this is not engaging enough, it's not able to engage you in something that elevates beyond a certain point, I think it'll fall flat. It falls flat all the time. There's no two minds about that it won't. So engaging is very important when you're doing that as a storyteller, be it in print, be it in audiovisual, be it in direct engagement. Can we have the next slide? Earnestness. Now, earnestness is something I'm relating again to the earthiness. Earnestness is, do you know what you are talking, or is it that it's very superficial? Audience knows. Trust me. I mean, we as an audience might not realize it consciously, but subconsciously we do realize that there is something that is amiss. This guy might be talking about, the storyteller might be talking about something great, big, fanciful, but there's no earnestness, there's no honesty, there's no depth into that. How do you then identify with the story that he's telling? There's no way that a story can succeed unless there is earnestness in that. Can we have the next slide? That's a fifth one. Now, this is very important. This is very important. This is empathy. I've done an entire session on empathy versus sympathy. And invariably, people confuse about empathy and sympathy. Empathy is not sympathy. Let's get it very, very clear. Sympathy is when you look at a top-down thing. Look at somebody and says, oh my, he doesn't have that. That means it's a certain amount of condescension. It's a condescending thing when you look at uske paas nahi hai. That means you feel there is a certain superiority. Empathy is different. Empathy is not even getting into somebody's shoes. In a discussion, somebody said, I said, it's not getting into somebody's shoes. It's getting into somebody's soul. Getting into somebody's soul is empathy. That's where you empathize. Are you able to get into the soul of the listener? That's a tricky thing. It sounds very tricky. But trust me, if you have all the 4 E's prior to this will kick into place. And it does. And when you have all the 5 together as a confluence, yes, it makes a great storytelling package. Can we have the next slide? The core of selling. Now let's actually come back to what is the core of selling. We've seen what is the core of storytelling. Now let's look at core of selling from the point of view of storytelling. Okay, we got first. So understanding product and need. Now, Prakash, you can go to that slide. Understanding product and need. That's very, very important. That's very important. Trying to understand. I'll tell you, since it is about storytelling, I'll be telling you small spiritual stories. This is a story do with Mahavir. Now, Mahavir, anybody who's read Mahavir had in his earlier days, he had a disciple called Makkali Gosalak. Now, Gosalak was somebody who actually later on formed a sect, which didn't actually kick off in a big way. But Gosalak used to always point finger at something or the other. So this story is a great understanding of understanding product, understanding the need, understanding the emotion, going into the core of the other person. That's very important, core of the other person. So Mahavir and all his disciples are actually going from one place to, these are wandering ascetics, So they will be going from one place to another. While they're going from one village to another, they actually stop at one place. They're sitting on one place. And Goshalak has this habit of time and again, trying to prove that Mahavir is wrong, So while they're sitting, there is a small flower that has just come out. Entire land is barren. There's just one small flower that's bloomed there. And it looks like wonder. How did the flower actually bloom there? And no flower accompanying, no plant accompanying, no tree, nothing. It's just a barren land. He looks at it and Gosala asks Mahavir, can you say, will this bud, small flower, actually flower into much bigger flower or not? So Mahavir goes and sits before the flower and meditates. So Gosalak says, "Lo, you can't do all that thing. You got to tell me in yes or no, it is not." He says, "Give me some time and I'll tell you." So Mahavir goes into this trance and comes out in a few minutes and he says, "Yes, it will." And Gosalak, because he has to prove a point that Mahavir is wrong, he plugs that bud or a small flower and tramples it under his feet. He says, he starts laughing. He says, "See, very much for your meditation. See, did it survive?" The other disciples are all very angry. Well, Mahavir says, "Calm down, just calm down, don't worry about it." They go to the villages and then they go into another couple of villages. And while they're coming back towards there, and incidentally, they stop at the same place. And lo and behold, it's barren everywhere, except for there's a same flower, but it's slightly bigger, blooming much better, and almost as if smiling at them. And everyone's like, wow, what has happened? How did it happen? So even Gosalak is like taken aback. How did it happen? He asked Mahavir, "What did you do?" He said, "I didn't care whether the outside wind is there, whether the conditions are good or not. I just went into the core of that plant. I just went into the core of that flower and wanted to understand whether it wants to live. It's not whether circumstances want it to live, because circumstances will be adverse. It's a lone one standing. There's no way it can take the wind, no way it can take the thing, and no way it can take Goshalak or somebody trampling on it. But if it has that core into it, it has that desire to win, desire to live, it will live." That, I think, is an understanding of the product. When we look into the emotion from a storyteller point of view, from a spiritual point of view, you must understand from a product point of view, from the need point of view. When you look at this, from a sales point of view, the first thing that everyone has been taught is to understand, know your product. I was told this first thing when I joined sales way back in '93, is the first thing you got to know is you should know the product like a back of your hand. Now, back of the hand is what you got to understand. You got to know. You've woken up out of your sleep, you should be able to know your product. It could be anything. It could be a tangible product like selling anything, white goods or anything. Or it could be investments, or it could be just an idea. But you should know what you're doing. Everything you should. Likewise, you must also know the need of the buyer. It's not only the product that will matter. If the buyer doesn't have that need, if you don't have an understanding, it doesn't make a bit of a difference. So that emotional connect has to be there. The understanding is very important from a storytelling point of view. Can we have the next slide, please? Awareness. Now, this is, again, Buddha's story. I keep coming back to Buddha. He's got some real amazing anecdotes in his life. Awareness is very, very important where you're doing that. When we look at the point of view of sales, we'll look at from the corporate point of view. Let's look at the story. Let's look at the anecdote. It's a very small anecdote. It sounds a little very vague kind of a thing, but I guess you'll be able to, I'm sure you'll be able to identify that. Once, Buddha and one of his closest disciples called Anand, were sitting, just discussing something, and there was no one else. And suddenly Anand realizes that Buddha waved his hand like this. I mean, he's like baffled a little bit. He says, "Bhagwan, why are you doing that? I mean, I saw a fly come and sit on your head a moment ago. You didn't wave it, but now it's flown away, and now you're waving your hand. What is that?" Buddha says, One simple thing. I made a mistake at that time that I was not aware of it. And I waved my hand, if you realize it, much later. And it was not with awareness. It was not with understanding. It not with the whole idea that their hand is moving, that there's a fly there, and I have to do that. I won't get too deep into the spiritual angle of it. But the fact that now when I'm waving it, I'm making sure that I'm aware of everything. I'm able to understand that there is a fly that has to be woven away. There is a hand that has to move. This is the process that will make the fly go away. That kind of awareness, going deep into the nitty-gritty of it, again relating to the earthiness that I spoke about when a storyteller talks about. Understanding the smaller nuances of selling here, in this case, of selling of the product need that we saw a slide ago, is what earthiness is. You've got to be grounded. You've got to understand that. Getting into the nitty-gritty. It's not the fanciful presentation that matters alone. It's something else that matters. And that awareness is very important while you're selling. Can we have the next slide? Conviction is steadfastness. Earnestness. Now, this is very, very important. Very important. I mean, over the years, I have had, like I said, I'm a storyteller. I call myself a storyteller and a sales guy, irrespective of whatever thing I've been doing, all these years. But the steadfastness has to be there. If you don't have that conviction, a rock solid conviction, it doesn't matter. Things will definitely waver. Things will not go your way. This is a small story. Since it's about back-to-back story, it's about storytelling. I'll tell you a story about Raja Janak. Now, Janak is a very generic name. Sita's father was also Janak. So Janak is a generic name given to. This Janak we are talking about is very realized soul. So Vedavyasa has a son called Sukdev. And Sukdev keeps asking him, why don't you give me the Brahmagyan? You teach everyone, you're not teaching me. What is that? I'm your son. So Vedavyasa says, you go and meet Janak. Janak will be able to tell you. Now Sukdev is aghast. How can a king tell me anything? एक भोगी मेरे को बताएगा योगी को कि योग की साधना क्या है करके. I mean, what kind of a odd reply is that? You don't want to tell me, it's fine. He doesn't say anything. He just wanders and keeps going, and he says, and then incidentally what happens is while he's just wandering around and it's sunset and he has no idea about it, and he reaches Janak's kingdom. Now since it's evening, it's night time, and he has to take rest. He can't wander around while it's dark. So he goes to the palace of King Janak. Now, the moment he enters, he's given a royal treatment. Everybody is like, please do come, and please, we are taking him to Janak. He's a little worried. He says, why is that? Why is this special preferential treatment given to me? When he goes inside, the first thing that strikes him is he's again aghast. And he says, look, I knew that this guy was bhogi. He's not a yogi. There's a dance happening. Madira chal rahi hai. Everyone is drinking. He says, this is the man who will tell me what yoga is, what the Brahma Gyan is. Seriously? I mean, are you kidding me, kinds? So, but he says, what do? I don't have a choice. So he is made to sit through this entire thing which he hates. Then at night, he's taken to a chamber where is a special thing. So he's given a royal treatment, and he's made to sit on a special seat and a gold plate which is filled with the best of eateries, best food that he has ever seen. But the shocking thing is that he's got on his head there is a sword dangling right above his head. And Sukdev is worried. He says, what the hell is happening? I mean, whoever does that, itna avbhagat samajh mein aata, but who keeps a naked sword up your head? Anytime it can fall and kill me. He somehow eats. He's not able to focus his energies into that. He says, what the hell am I going to do? I just eat this and fast. At night before he's going to sleep, Janak asks him, is everything right, sir? Where the service is good? Are you happy? He says, I am happy, but one thing I don't understand is why on earth was this sword always there? He says, like you were thinking about that I am living a life which is debauched life, which is all fun, which is all immoral thing. Above all these things, I know whatever I am doing, that there is a sword of death that is hanging above me. Everything will go right this moment without I knowing that. And I'm aware of this thing every single moment, whether I'm eating food, whether I'm seeing a dance, when I'm drinking, whatever I'm doing, is I'm aware of that. So that is the kind of steadfastness that you must have. You must have conviction towards what you're doing. You must have steadfastness. That's the earnestness when you bring in a certain quality into storytelling and to sales as well. Can we have the next slide, please? Now, this is very important. This is very, very important. And I've realized on personal experience as well, from a storyteller angle as well as from a selling angle, is the more interactive one is, the better it is. What is engaging? One is that you must not be top down, or neither outside in. The opposite of top down is outside in. It's I think I borrowed this phrase from Jack Welch, I think. So none of that. It has to be interactive, and it goes exactly the same way when it for storytelling as well as selling. It has to be interactive. Things have to be spoken with, not spoken at. Now, if you're able to understand, you got that's the small nuance that makes the difference. Speak at someone, speak to someone, or speak with someone. So neither speak at someone, not speak to someone, but speak with someone. So the moment you're doing that in a storytelling, you're engaging them. I have Kabir's photo there. Kabir used to do that. Smaller things, dohe ho, chopaiyan ho, choti choti baatein ho. He used to make it sound as if they are talking to them. And they are interactive. It's their life, their story, our story, not my story telling you your story recounted by me. No, it is our story. That is what makes a story great. That is what makes a sales pitch great. Can we have the next slide, please? Relation building. Now, I got Krishnan Pandav there in case it's not very clear. I will keep going back to Krishna, keep going back to Mahabharata, and that's a very great aspect of it. Understanding Krishna is very, very important when you realize it. What was Krishna's role there? Was he a friend? Was he a philosopher? Was he a relative? Was he a guide? Was he a God incarnate helping them? Was he setting the dharma right by doing what he did? All of that. Yet not one thing is what gave God predominance. He gave predominance to all of that. When it comes to relationship building, relation building is very, very important, either in storytelling as well as in selling. Very, very important, that because if you are there to sell, I think most of you who takes sales lessons or teach or guiding your group will be telling that it's not just mere selling. It's not, the entire thing doesn't end once the product is sold. It's that the entire thing about after sales. We are talking about how we build a relationship. Is there a customer or a client who comes back to you? What makes him or her come back to you is that because in that sales pitch, in that storytelling, in that entire exercise, you are building relationship. You're not merely selling. That's important. And that can only happen when there is a certain empathy. Again, coming back to, I did discuss that, I'm sure if you realize or remember that, I did talk about clear demarcation between sympathy and empathy. Getting into the soul. Getting into the soul is very important. Once you get into the soul, you have built that relationship, and that build relationship. Sometimes relationship lasts much more than the product. In most cases, it does if it's good selling, and it must. So I guess that's the core of what selling it from a storytelling point of view. Can we have the next slide, please? So it's sum up is, if we look at it, understanding product and need. While we had many slides, so I'm just do a final takeaway and sum up of it. Understanding is very important, to know the product, need of the person who's buying, who's thinking, whether the product actually matches or not. Awareness of multiple things, awareness about the requirement of it, awareness about the shortcomings as well. Now, one thing perhaps I missed there from the selling point of view, I think sales experts out here like Prakash will be able to shed more light perhaps in a different presentation altogether, is the awareness. Awareness also realizes to understand weaknesses, your own weaknesses, your product's weaknesses also. That's very, very important. Not just to hide the weaknesses, but to make sure that you actually are talking about that, and in the back of the mind, you're aware of it. Conviction and steadfastness. There is no way that you can sell anything, no way you can tell a story, no way that you can be a great salesperson or great storyteller. None of it is possible unless you have conviction and you're steadfast towards that. Interactive. Like I said, it can't be speaking to someone, it has to be speaking with someone. You have to talk to someone, talk with someone, sorry, not talk to someone. And relationship building. That's a longer arc. Again, we spoke about the story arc. You remember beginning, middle, and end. Now the end is a very tricky thing when it comes to sales. When you're looking at a story, relationship building, does the story end with selling the product? Well, that's a big question mark. I mean, yeah, we can discuss the cows come home, but to me it doesn't. To me, perhaps that's a beginning. Relationship building is once the product is sold. Is he coming back to you as a person? Is he coming back to you to buy another product? Is he coming back to you to discuss something? It could be as inane as perhaps discussing something else he wants to buy. And he realizes this person is the guy I need to turn to get an honest opinion. So I think this is a sum up of how storytelling gets built up in the entire confluence of sales pitch, the story arc as in from the beginning, middle, and end. Can we have the next slide, please? Epilogue. Now, I hope, do you remember what my prologue was? Can somebody write in chat whether they remembered what the story was? Can somebody write 1 line or 2 lines till the time I'm babbling? Yeah. So I'm waiting for somebody to respond to that chat and all, or perhaps through audio response as well, if they can do that. Did you remember? I will tell you the rest part story. This is a small anecdote. What is waving hand? No, story of the fly is not the one. Story of the fly is later one. Sakyamuni Buddha's secret was the first one. I'll tell you the entire story. Okay, not story of the fly. This is the story I told in the prologue. Rahul, I don't know whether you missed the first one, the initial one, the first one. Sakyamuni Buddha folding hands. Exactly. Prakash has got it. Folding hands. So I'll just redo the entire thing. Buddha has attained enlightenment and he's sitting silent. The entire universe is now a very pristine, very calm, very quiet. There's something that has changed in the world that was not there a moment ago. And in that one moment, something has completely changed. It's not just one man, him relying Buddhatva, but there's something that has happened to the world outside. And then they're all waiting. They say everybody showers flour onto him and they're all waiting and anxiously. He keeps quiet and then he starts folding his hands. Folding hands up, down, and bows down everywhere, left, right. They're all baffled. Who are you bowing down to? This is a position you reached after millenniums. Anybody comes to that position. Who are you bowing down to? We don't know anybody and we are nowhere near you. And who on earth are you bowing to? Can you please tell us this? Buddha opens his eyes and says, I am bowing to the sun. I'm bowing to the moon. I'm bowing to the stars. I'm bowing to the flowers, the grass, the wind, the mountain, the trees, the animals, human beings, insects, everything. Just look at Buddha's entirety. He's saying that I am thankful to all of them. If the sun had not risen at that point of time, I wouldn't have reached this position. If the wind had not blown the way it did, I would not have risen this thing. If the wind had not helped me from the scorching sun, if the tree had not given me the shade I required, if the plants had not given me the fruits I required, if the people had not been able to tell me what wrong I've been doing, will I be able to reach that position? No. Just remember that. That person, Buddha, reaching the highest echelon a man can think about. Yet he is thankful to every single person, every single being, every single, perhaps even viruses, every single amoeba. He's thankful to them. I think as a storyteller, as a seller, we must always realize that we should be thankful to it. That's a thing that cuts across anything we do in life. If we are able to do that in life, perhaps sounds a little metaphoric in the entire thing, but if you can understand from the metaphor that this is something that forms the core of anything successful in life, period. End of it. Whether it's sales, whether it's storytelling, whether it's being an entrepreneur, anything. That sense of thankfulness is very, very important. I think it's kind of like answer. If you can just have a next slide. This is the follow-up sessions. If we are looking at it, a salesperson storytelling arc, we did talk about briefly about what our salesperson storytelling arc is, beginning, middle, and end. We can look into one of these follow-up sessions. And there's the Mahabharat mantra, the learning sales lessons from the great epic. So epic, like all stories have great lessons to be learned for every single thing. Mahabharata, I keep coming back to. For a salesperson to learn from Mahabharata, Mahabharata is like a veritable treasure chest. It's like a sea. The moment you take it, and the sea is still there. I mean, anyone can keep taking nuggets out of it till endless time. So these are follow-up, just giving you a hint of glimpse of these follow-up sessions, which are some way directly related, obviously, to this. An extension of what we have. This is a very concise, shorter version that we saw right now, 45 minutes. I think this is exactly. Prakash, we'll have the next slide. I think I'm kind of like through. Thank you everyone. I think for patiently listening to me. I think there are 21, 22 people out there, and thank you.
So thank you.